Hi everyone, my name is Hayden Alexander Butcher. Welcome back to Hang and Vibe. This Sunday, Jonathan preached on 2 Samuel chapter 15, verses 1 through 37. In this passage, Absalom is back in Israel and back in the line of succession to be king, but he does not want to wait until David is gone and it's his turn. He wants to be king now. So he starts campaigning to the people and making himself out to look like a king. He buys some chariots and recruits some men to kind of follow him and boost his cred. And he sits outside the gate of Jerusalem and he talks to the people who come to the gate and hears their causes and makes it out as though David is too busy to hear their cause, but if Absalom were king, he would be a much better king and he would hear their cause and do something to help them. So this is going on over the course of 4 years. And Absalom is winning over the hearts of the people. And it all culminates in Absalom going to David to request that he go to Hebron. He claims that he's going to Hebron to worship. But if we remember from earlier in the book, Hebron is where David was crowned king. And so Absalom is thinking, I want to go to the place where David was crowned king to start my reign as king. And so Absalom goes to Hebron. And he sends word to all throughout Israel that he's about to become king. And word reaches David. And David realizes that this has been going on. And now it's too late. So it's time for him to flee. So we see David fleeing the city, weeping, barefoot, and he has some followers who go with him. And one of the amazing things that we see is that among the people who are fleeing the city with David are 600 men from Gath, which Gath is a Philistine city. Gath is where Goliath was from. And so David watches all these people from Gath who are following him, and he pulls aside Ittai, the Gittite, and he asks him, like, you guys aren't even my family. Like, why are you guys following me? And we see here the faithfulness of Ittai, the Gittite. And he basically says, as Yahweh lives, I will follow you. Ittai is saying that you are still the king in my book. And this might have reminded David of the story of his great-grandmother Ruth, who was also a foreigner, but followed her mother-in-law into Israel because of her faithfulness to God. And also among the people that followed David were Abiathar and Zadok, the priests. They brought with them the ark. But David actually turns down the ark because he is trusting that God is with him, whether the ark is with him or not. He's demonstrating humility. And he's also keeping Israel's needs in mind because he says basically Israel needs the ark more than he does. But he's also demonstrating a bit of wisdom because he sends Abiathar and Zadok back to Israel, or back to Jerusalem, to basically operate as spies. He says that they can keep an eye on what's happening with Absalom and report back to him all that's going on. Another individual named Hushai, he shows up to follow David, and David sends him back to Jerusalem to kind of act as a advisor to Absalom because David's advisor, Ahithophel, has switched sides and gone after Absalom. And so David prays that God would thwart the plans of Ahithophel. And right after he prays this, Hushai shows up. And so David sees that as an answer to his prayer. And so he sends Hushai to kind of act as a double agent as well. And in all of this, we should see a foreshadowing of the path that Jesus took. In fact, Jesus took the same path as David, literally. David crossed the brook Kidron and went up the Mount of Olives as he's exiting the city. And that's exactly the path that Jesus took when he was betrayed by Judas. He crossed over the brook Kidron and he went up to the Garden of Gethsemane, which some translations say is an olive grove. So he also went up to the Mount of Olives. But some differences we see is that while Jesus also has an adversary in Satan and a betrayer in Judas, he doesn't have these followers that David did. He doesn't have these faithful men by his side because everyone abandoned him. But what we ultimately want to see is while this passage may look like it's over for David and this is the end of his reign, we will see in future passages that Absalom doesn't win, Satan doesn't win, and that is exactly what we see in the life of Jesus as well. When he is on the cross, it may look like it's over and Satan has won, but as we know, it's not over for Jesus on the cross. It's actually where his victory takes place, because Satan never wins. And that's the greatest lesson that we should take from this passage. In the evening, Jonathan preached on Psalm 4. He called this sermon a biblical cure for insomnia, because in verse 8, David writes, "In peace I will both lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety." And we want to find out from this passage, how can we arrive at verse 8? How can we lie down and sleep in safety? And Jonathan has 3 points in this sermon. The first one that we need to receive in order to find that rest that David has is that there is a righteousness to receive. Verse 1 says, "Answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness." And it's not that David is saying that he himself is righteous and that's why God should answer him. He knows that it is God's righteousness and that his righteousness comes from God. And that is something that we can believe and know in Christ. If we are in Christ, we have God's righteousness in him. And the second point of the sermon is that there is a truth to embrace. David in this passage is responding to retorts from the world, basically telling him that following God is not going to get him ahead in life. They're kind of shaming him for his faithfulness to God. But one point that we need to take is that God's will is not for us to get ahead in life. His will is just to give us rest. And that's what following God can afford us. Following God and being obedient to his word, it gives you a clear conscience. And having a clear conscience is what helps you sleep at night. Thirdly, there is a posture to take. Verses 4 and 5 say, "Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord." So the posture that we need to take before God is of humility. We need to remember that God is God and I am not. And in humility, we need to be silent and worship him. And then ultimately, the last point is that there is a joy to know In contrast, the people, David says in verse 6, there are many who say, who will show us some good? And right after that, the psalm says, lift up the light of your face upon us, O Lord. And in the ESV, that is part of the quote that the many are saying, but different translations put the quotation mark elsewhere after the who will show us some good, and make it that David is saying, lift up the light of your face upon us, O Lord. So David is praying for the people that God would shine his face upon them. And verses 7 and 8 conclude David saying, you have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound. And then you have verse 8, in peace I will both lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. And what David is pointing out in this verse is that joy is not found in our circumstances. You know, even when grain and wine abound, even when our circumstances are favorable, that's not where true joy comes from, because our joy is found in God. So even when our circumstances aren't that great, when our grain and our wine is not abounding, David can still lie down and sleep because his joy is in God, and ours should be as well. And now for the music this week. First up, we have the Flashbulb. This is a gentleman named Ben Jordan who lives in Chicago, and he has a YouTube channel where he talks about music and showcases some of his music and stuff. I actually discovered him before I discovered his YouTube channel. I just discovered him as a musician and liked his music, and then I discovered his YouTube channel. But some of my favorite songs by him, first I want to talk about Childhood Loop, which is from the album Kirlian Tapes. I don't know how that's pronounced, but this track has some pretty piano and some upright bass in the intro. And then a lovely beat comes in with a lovely piano and bass line. There's also some excellent horns that come in at one point. And then some pretty strings. From the album Nothing Is Real, I like the song Through Mud. This one has a cool beat with some glitchy bass. And then a pretty piano line comes in, kind of in the background. And then the bass switches up and the piano comes more into the foreground. The Fear of Vision. This one has some very pretty old-timey sounding piano and some nice synth pads. And then this nice beat comes in with some beautiful strings. Moth and Light. This one is really cool. This has like a beautiful marimba sound, and it sounds a lot like C418, which is an artist that I've mentioned several times and will indeed get into in this episode. yeah, it just has also a very pretty music box melody that comes in, and there's some nice strings towards the middle. The album Our Simulacra, this was actually the first album I listened to by him. The first song I heard by him was Your Simulacrum. This one has a cool intro.
Because we share memories of common events. Thus, there's an enormous amount of work to be done.
Then an awesome dance beat with some cool bass.
All of your joy is in a simulation. All of your hate is in a simulation.
I love it when at one part the kick drum pounds out the beat of the vocal rhythm. I love that effect.
All of your joy is in a simulation. All of your hate is in a simulation.
And then the beat slows down at one point, kind of similar in fashion to Sun Gazer, how they switch up tempos a lot. And then there's like a cool vocoder harmony in the vocals. Then the tempo picks back up for the rest of the song. F-Box is a pretty cool song. This one has a cool synth line. And then a nice, fast-paced, like IDM beat. And then Drama Function is a good song from this album. It has a nice, like, sparse beat and some neat synth and some pretty piano chords. The synth pads kind of build up, and then this beautiful violin comes in. There's also a pretty piano melody towards the end. Future Recovery is another one from this album. It has a cool low-pitched beat, some nice pretty synth. And then there's a cool moment when the bass comes in. And then the last one from this track, and then the last track from this album is called Flutter. So it's just a beautiful piano piece. It also reminds me a lot of C418. And then the last track I'm going to share by the Flashbulb is called Saints from the album Piety of Ashes. This one has a cool ticking beat, kind of like a clock. And then a quite cool bass and piano comes in. So the next artist is C418. This is Daniel Rosenfeld. He is from Chemnitz, Germany. That's probably not how you pronounce it, but he's from Germany, and he actually now lives in Austin, Texas, as far as I can tell. But he did the soundtrack to Minecraft, and the first song I want to share is from the soundtrack to Minecraft. It's called Tazwell, I don't know. This is actually a really long track. It has a long ambient intro. The beat comes in at about 4 minutes. It's a nice quiet beat. And then there's some pretty piano. And a nice synth line comes in at one point. I want to share several tracks from the album 1. This is actually a soundtrack to the Minecraft documentary. And the first track is called Cliffside Hinson. This one has a cool synth intro with some marimba. It builds up and then cuts out. And then this beautiful piano line comes in. Then the piano plays the opening melody for a bit, and then some nice bass comes in along with some strings. Surface Pension is another good track. This one has a pretty cool bell-like melody, some nice piano. It builds up to a cool beat with some nice low bells. And then it cuts to this quiet part with some keyboard clicking on the beat. Like a typing keyboard, like you can hear the clicking of like typing on a keyboard. And then the First Million is a good song. This one has some nice cinematic strings. Leads up to a piano part. It has a just absolutely beautiful melody in the keys. There's another lovely piano part. The second half has some slow building strings. And then it cuts out and it ends with this powerful piano stab. Another nice track is called Certitudes, because it has a really pretty marimba melody and some nice piano that comes in after the intro. The tempo slows down at one point and there's a nice quiet piano part with some more marimba. Then the synth comes back in with a cool slow drum beat. The whole thing, I feel like it sounds better in a slower tempo. And I love the beautiful, slow, soft outro. Drunken Carboni, or Carboni, I don't know how it's pronounced, but this one is a really pretty track. It has some pretty jingling bells. This track just definitely has some very winter vibes. Faux video production. This song has a nice playful piano and some pretty synth melody comes in. It has the same musical themes as The First Million. I love it when the violin comes in and it sounds like just like a trekking adventure. There's some beautiful piano in the outro that plays the same melody as The First Million. Next track is called This Doesn't Work. This one has a upbeat synth tune to start out. Nice synth line comes in. And there's a cool part where it quiets down and then some like discordant synth comes in that sounds pretty cool. I like the parts. There's a couple parts where it cuts out and there's like a double marimba hit before the beat comes back in. And the last track I want to share from this album is called Clumsiness and Innovation. And this one just has a cool piano/synth melody. The last track I want to share by C418 is actually, as far as I know, it's not Minecraft related. It's from the album Dief, D-I-E-F, I don't know how that's pronounced. But this song is called Work-Life Imbalance. It has a really cool beat. I love the synth line. It has a really unique melody in the context of the key that the song is in. Just a few bonus tracks for this week. First, they're all by an artist called Polynation, and they're all from the album Igneous. First track is called Cascade. This one has an awesome syncopated synth melody. There's a cool quiet part in the middle with some like echoey xylophone. Next, the track Lori. This one has a beautiful marimba melody. At one point, the bass comes in and the melody switches up a bit. And then this cool arpeggiated synth comes in. Lastly, the track 770 or 770 or however you would pronounce it. This one just has a sweet chord progression. And then this amazing synth melody comes in. It just sounds very adventure-y. I like it. Well, that's all for this week. Hope you enjoyed, and be sure to check out the Spotify playlist in the description. And stay tuned for the next episode. I'll see you all then. Bye.